It was our soldiers' last night on Afghan soil, the last before their first real day of peace. Wars end in different ways. Somewhere they drag on with a sluggish truce, somewhere with the signing of high-profile agreements, but for Soviet soldiers it ended like this, on the appointed day, at the agreed place, on the borderline where a foreign land ended and the motherland began. 11 months earlier, in distant Geneva, this date had been set, February 15th, and since then, the soldiers, counting the days on homemade military calendars, had been waiting for it as a symbol of their return, as a point after which they could once again live a normal life. And now that day had come. Everything lay ahead, the meeting with the motherland. What is the joy of returning after a long and difficult war? It is difficult to describe in words, but you can imagine it from the faces of the people. On this day, even the battle-hardened generals, who had been through a lot, sang along with the artists. It seemed as if the very ground beneath their feet was vibrating with songs, laughter, and tears. But behind those smiles lay years of exhausting battles, sleepless nights, and heavy thoughts about what they had been through. The last to leave Afghanistan were the most experienced, the most hardened fighters, those who could have returned home in the fall but remained in the ranks. They stayed not for awards or glory, but to avoid putting the lives of their young comrades, who had only recently arrived at the mountain garrisons, at risk. They consciously decided to see the war through to the end so as not to ruin the futures of those who still had a long time to serve. And then the last commands were given on Afghan soil. The combat column lined up, the armored personnel carriers' engines roared, and slowly but surely it moved toward the border. Now everything seemed to be behind them. The fighting was over, the ambushes, raids, and marches along scorched trails were over. But for these soldiers, the war would never end. It would live on in their memories until the end of their days. It would come to them in their nightmares in the form of the faces of fallen comrades, the roar of artillery salvos and machine gun fire, the explosions of mines on mountain roads, and the fire and smoke of falling helicopters. Can this war ever end while the mothers and wives of the fallen are still alive, while their orphaned children are still alive? Can we talk about a complete end when they have not yet been given a clear and honest answer? What was it all for, in the name of what? For them, as for many returning soldiers, the war continued and will continue for a long time, in their hearts, in their memories, in their tears. It did not end for the commander of the 40th Army, hero of the Soviet Union Lieutenant General Boris Vsevolodovich Gromov. He gave more than 5 years of his life to Afghanistan, commanding troops, making decisions that cost the lives of hundreds and saved thousands. And then came that day, February 15, 1989, when Gromov crossed the Friendship Bridge, the last to leave Afghan soil behind. His famous words spread throughout the country. There is not a single Soviet soldier, officer, or ensign left behind me. This 9-year war is over. But Gromov added something else, no less important, that monuments should be erected to the soldiers who had gone through these 9 years of hell. After all, they did not simply follow orders, they honestly and wholeheartedly fulfilled their military duty, protecting their comrades and bearing the excessive burden of this war. And now a new life was beginning for them, service in peaceful conditions. "Happy service to you," said the general, "and may no more of our soldiers ever cross the border between war and peace." These words sounded like a testament to an entire generation. Meanwhile, in Termez, on the Soviet side of the border, thousands of people were waiting for their soldiers. The soldiers returned to their families and were greeted as heroes. Those who came to meet them held bouquets of flowers, songs and speeches rang out in the streets, and people wept with joy. It was an event that the country had been waiting for 9 long years, the final withdrawal of the limited contingent of Soviet troops from Afghanistan. The army units and formations had accomplished their mission. They had provided international assistance to the Republic of Afghanistan and returned to their homeland in full force. Words of gratitude were heard at the rallies, and these were not empty words. Each of the returnees had gone through the terrible experience of war, and many wore orders and medals on their chests. All of them had walked the fiery roads of Afghanistan and fulfilled their duty to their fatherland with honor. the first solemn march on native soil after the Afghan roads. For thousands of soldiers, it became a symbol of returning home, to a peaceful life, to their families. For some, it was the long-awaited end of their service. For others, it was only an intermediate point, as some of the soldiers continued their service, heading deeper into the country to their permanent bases. But in any case, this day marked a turning point. The Soviet Union's military assistance to Afghanistan officially ended. According to a popular belief, as if nature itself had blessed the return, it snowed in Turkmenistan that day. At exactly 10 a.m. Moscow time, the first combat vehicles, followed by the last columns, plowed through the white canvas of the road behind a bridge across the Panj River. This bridge, which had become a symbol of war and peace, had been crossed by tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers over 9 years. Today, it became the place where an entire era came to an end. Nearby stood a stone monument, an obelisk erected in 1913 in honor of Pushkin's anniversary. And now it became a silent witness to a historic event, the end of a war that lasted almost twice as long as the Great Patriotic War. On this bridge, the soldiers heard someone say, "So, the war is over." Over, not in the sense of defeat, but as a symbol of the end of a difficult journey. Today, the orchestra did not play the traditional victory march. But the fanfare and words of welcome still heralded victory, not military victory, but something far more important, the victory of reason and sober politics, the victory of common sense. After all, the Soviet soldiers did not leave defeated, but having fulfilled their duty to the end. Local authorities and ordinary people did everything possible to make the soldiers' welcome a truly festive occasion. Right from the site of the solemn meeting, it was possible to call anywhere in the country and send telegrams that would bring joy to mothers, wives, children, fiancés, and friends. The phone lines were open, and thousands of families heard the long-awaited words that day, "Mom, I'm back. I'm alive." I wanted to believe that this attitude towards soldiers who had been to Afghanistan would be met not only here, at the border, but in all the cities and villages of our vast homeland. After all, they deserve respect and gratitude. Traffic continued today on the highway where convoys of military equipment had traveled for 9 years. But now it was carrying only peaceful cargo, goods, food, and building materials. The highway was once again becoming a road of life, not a road of war. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of that day.